All right, folks, there are still a few lingering Galakrond's Awakening card reviews, so let's go ahead and close this loop.
Hey, buddy, watch this.
That's right, after a rather strange reveal season, we finally got all these cards once Galakrond's Awakening actually finally hit live servers. We're going to do a real quick review. I already discussed some of these at length in my previous leaks video, but a couple new cards as well to talk about a little more, like Cleric of Scales, a new 1-mana 1/1 for Priest. Battlecry if you're holding a dragon. Discover a spell from your deck. Now, initially I saw this and I was like, ooh, Shadow Visions. That's insane. Shadow Visions was so strong. But it has been confirmed this will not be a copy of a spell from your deck. This will draw you the actual spell, which does limit it a little bit because you could do things like make 4 Mind Blasts in the past with Shadow Visions, right? Your 2 natural ones and your 2 additional ones. That was really cool. Although Mind Blast certainly has rotated out, you can't even make duplicates of stuff. You're still limited to the number that would naturally be in your deck, which does make this a little iffier. That said, still a good way to help you find stuff. If there's one specific spell you're looking for, maybe you got a Surrender to Madness deck and you really need to hit Surrender to Madness. God knows why that'd be the case, but perhaps it could be. This could help you find that any other key combo piece or just really high value generator, that mid-game board clear you desperately need to stay alive. Cleric of Scales can still help you find that even if it's not generating extra resources. So, I mean, really, when you look at this, it's like a Novice Engineer that's cheaper and helps you pick and even tutor a specific kind of card, which is still really good, I think, despite the fact that it doesn't make copies. So this could certainly fit into a handful of different kinds of decks combo control, maybe even some faster decks that are looking to find some follow-up damage of some sort, which means to me Cleric of Scales looks like a very playable card. Moving on here to the Fiendish Servant, a card you might have already seen in Battlegrounds, also coming to normal constructed Hearthstone. 1 mana 2/1 demon for Warlock. Death Rattle. Give this minion's attack to a random friendly minion. So you've got here a nice little way to start the game that can trade into your opponent's stuff and deposit its attack value onto the next minion you have on board, which does really fit the Zoo playstyle for Warlock rather nicely. They often want to do a little bit of trading early while they're starting to stabilize their board, thereby turning those smaller minions into either more value trades or just a lot of pressure to your opponent's face, both of which can be achieved via Fiendish Servant. If this hits a 1/1, it can help it trade up. If it hits something big, it can go face, vice versa. It just makes your trades cleaner, and it's a pretty good way to start the game too. Compared to a lot of other 1-drops now, you might still favor something like a Blazing Battle Mage just to get some stats on board, but this does have a demon possibility if you play into any kind of demon line, and I do think it just fits Zoo really, really well with that kind of trade-up aspect with its attack here. So I think Fiendish Servant, it's not one of those like obvious, like, yes, it's perfect, but it does make sense in a couple different angles, so this looks like a viable card in my mind. So the Frenzied Fellwing, we already talked about a ton in my previous leaks video. This seems like a really good card for aggro decks. They can do face damage pretty consistently. All kinds of direct spell damage also makes this cheap, so this will almost certainly see some play in fast decks, and I think it'll be a really high tempo card in those decks too. This one looks really strong. Moving on here to Shadow Sculptor for Rogue, a new 5 mana 3/2 with combo. Draw a card for each card you've played this turn. So if you're able to play a lot of little stuff, say like coins from Umbral Skulker or lackeys in a Galakrond deck, then you can chain this into a ton of card draw, which, you know, a year ago I would have said was absolutely amazing. In a world today where Rogue is drawing everything for free with their Galakrond and their Wondrous Wands, I do have a little more doubts about Shadow Sculptor. Like, it's always going to be competing against things like Galakrond being in the same standard format rotation and Togwaggle as well. So I don't know that this ever really gets there as we understand Rogue today. Like, theoretically, it still kind of makes sense as a, you know, alternative to something like Gadgetzan Auctioneer, kind of in an opposite direction. Instead of playing a Gadgetzan and then a bunch of stuff, this card you play a bunch of stuff and then you drop this to kind of be your Gadgetzan. Which in theory is okay, but keep in mind that's kind of backwards because you can't keep chaining things, right? You have to have the stuff in hand to make this work, whereas Gadgetzan you can play off the top of your deck. So even in that miracle world, it still feels like it's aligned a little bit backwards. And compared to other payoff cards from big cycles like Questing Adventure or Edwin, I just don't know that this does enough. So yes, theoretically, if you look at it kind of in a vacuum, it makes sense to me, but contextually in Rogue, I just think there are cards that do better things and present better options for the class. So Shadow Sculptor, I'm left a little bit wanting. Next up here is Fresh Scent for Hunter, a new 2-mana spell, twin spell, give a beast +2/+2. So if you spend 2 mana here, you got yourself, it's a pretty efficient little buff, and it can also be like a 4-mana Blessing of Kings, right? So Blessing of Kings is a great card in Paladin, and I can see, this going with face damage in a class that has a ton of charge with Hunter, also a lot of rush minions in Hunter. So these stats probably get put into play even more consistently than a card like Blessing of Kings. Plus, it's got a lot of flexibility as well, because it can be that 4-mana play if you need it to be without losing any resources in hand. Could also be flexible. You split it over multiple turns or put it on multiple minions to make better trades, or to, kind of diversify your pressure a little bit to make it harder for your opponent to deal with it. So to me, Fresh Scent certainly makes a lot of sense, and Hunter can use a card like this quite impactfully with all that rush and charge stuff. So this one looks really, really good. Moving on here to the Licensed Adventurer, new 2-mana 3/2 battle cry. If you control a quest, add a coin to your hand. So a nice little early game minion here if you're running either quests or side quests. Remember, also work with this text as we've seen before. And some decks I think are like a really natural fit for this. Think Quest Druid, for instance, who really cares about early game mana manipulation and still might want a minion to play. So you can play your Licensed Adventurer on 2, get that coin to guarantee that you're still completing that extra mana quest activation for Druid. So that right there gives this card a great angle, but I think all kinds of other decks could utilize that as well. Just getting that coin can help you cheat out a 4-drop on your following turn, maybe play an additional 1-drop alongside this. So any quest deck that's looking to be a little bit more aggressive, or basically make up the mana they spent on that quest for that initial turn 1 play or that side quest, could probably use this really well. And then you got the possibility for combo decks that may need a more consistent way to get to higher than 10 mana. If they run a quest, they could play a couple of these, get a couple coins in hand, and then go to like 12 mana. I mean, obviously, you got to play things in the right order there. You got to go down to 8 and then back up to 10. But you get the idea, more total mana in a turn available for a deck that might need that to achieve some kind of combo. So a couple different ways for this card to fit into some decks contextually. A couple obvious ones, a couple ones where we don't maybe know what that looks like right now, but it has a lot of potential. To me, means Licensed Adventure is a pretty sweet card. Next up here, we have the Boom Pistol Bully, which by most people's opinion appears to be the star of Galakrond's Awakening. Not sure that I disagree. If you look at popular decks right now, there are like 10, 12, 15 Battlecry minions in like all decks, or cards in general. If hero cards technically count too. So this can stop Galakronds, it can stop minions, can stop Leroy's, for instance. If you think you're going to die, it can make you the Leroy 10 mana instead of 5, which could be a really big deal if you're trying to stop those mid-game Leroy's from killing you. So it answers big win conditions for your opponent with Galakrond. It answers all kinds of like little chain lackey style plays to prevent your opponent from using lackeys in their lackey deck. It prevents damage and pressure. It's just like this awesome card that will almost always disrupt your opponent at least a little bit, or make them consider alternate lines. Much like Lotheb used to do, I think Boom Pistol Bully will satisfy the same sort of stuff, same stat line. This looks like a very, very, very good card that a lot of different decks will be able to play in that kind of mid-rangey slot. Controlled tech can toss one in, mid-range decks can toss one in, Highlander decks would certainly love to put this in there. So Boom Pistol Bully, I think, is almost assuredly going to see some degree of play. So moving on here to the Hailbringer, we talked about this guy a fair bit. He's summoning a couple ice shards that will freeze on attack. And although this is a good way to go wide, I think that there are more consistent options. The ones are just going to die pretty easily. They won't often trade up in a meaningful freeze that like slows down your opponent. It's a pretty passive on the back foot sort of play. And most decks, I think, will find better ways to like swarm the board and go wide. More dedicated lines. They won't care too much about the freeze. Now, this is an elemental, so if something like an elemental mage did find some success, Hailbringer could fit into that deck. But even then, it still just feels a little bit too passive, not quite directed enough, not high pressure enough. And for that reason, I think Hailbringer probably going to fall a little short. So next up here is the Risky Skipper, 1 mana, 1/3 for Warrior. After you play a minion, deal 1 damage to all minions. I really like this card a lot. I think it's a cool way to contest an early game board of your opponents. Killing off lackeys, it plays into tons of synergies for Warrior, those Acolyte of Pain style things. We've also got the new card that can summon you some boom bots as well with your Risky Skipper. It's a 1 mana, 1/3 that trades really well into early boards. This is like a dream card for what Warrior wants to do. This one's really, really good. Moving on to Waxmancy, a 2 mana spell for Rogue. Discover a Battlecry minion, reduce its cost by 2. So this is like a primordial glyph for rogues and for battlecry minions specifically. And you might think, oh man, primordial glyph was so good. And it was. I don't think Waxmancy is going to be nearly so good though, for a couple reasons. Number one, Discover got nerfed a ton when it comes to minions because now it's not biased towards class cards. It pulls from the entire pool of minions at an equal rate. So on average, you're going to get 3 neutral battle cries that are probably not all that good. There's a lot of battle cries that do non-synergistic things with your deck or style or archetype that are just like, oh, okay, I got a couple 1-drops in my hand. Yay. There are other big battle cries that, although getting discounted, still just, you're not often going to hit the things that you care about, like Dragon Queen, Alexstrasza's, and the high rolls of that world. And you don't get access to class cards outside of Rogue, right? You only get Rogue and neutral cards, so that really limits some of the crazy battle cries you might get, like Imris or something if you're looking for, or like a big Shutterwalk kind of play is not possible with the Discover pool being limited to class only. So you got bad choices on average, you've got limited choices on average, and even though there's a discount that you can kind of bank for the future, I still don't think it's really going to be worth it, just because it's going to offer so much inconsistency and unpredictability. It's like you might need something big, you get a bunch of small stuff, vice versa. Waxmancy is just going to be more awkward than good, which will leave it inconsistent and out of most decks. Moving on here to Twisted Knowledge for Warlock 2-minute spell. Discover 2 Warlock cards. So this one's interesting, right? You can turn 1 card into 2, which is fun for things like handlock, maybe if they're trying to increase the size of their hand. But remember, you can also kind of do that with your hero power for 2 mana. But of course, this can allow you to do an extra one as well if you happen to have 4 mana laying around. But also, there is this notion that you could perhaps discover something you need off of a card like this. So if you need like face damage, you get 2 chances to discover face damage. Or if you alternatively need a board clear, you get 2 chances to discover a board clear. Whereas if you ran either of those in your deck, you might not get the one you need for the specific matchup. So this does, I think, offer a little bit of extra flexibility. That said, I think most decks really know what they're looking to do and understand their matchups pretty well. So as a meta gets refined, I think cards like this become less necessary. That kind of in a pinch decision making is probably less important than just running good stuff and the most optimized stuff for your meta and your list. So I don't really know if this is good enough to kind of get over the hump when it comes to cutting other things from your deck. I think most decks and most people will probably prefer to just run something they know is going to be good instead of a card that offers some unreliability and some bad chances and the chance to low roll and kind of waste some mana. So for me, Twisted Knowledge, it looks okay, just not great. And then finally, my last card here is the Chopshop Copter, a 3-mana 2/4 mech that reads, after a friendly mech dies, add a random mech to your hand. So we got a mech resource generating style card here where you can trade in your stuff, get some additional mechs in hand. Now, I know Mech Hunter is a viable sort of archetype, but this card has some problems for me. Namely, Mech Hunter in standard format right now doesn't really run reload. Their curve is actually mid-rangey enough with those like War Gears and missile launchers that they tend to end the game about the same time they start running out of cards. And if they do run out of cards, it's like really hard to regain anything because once they lose the initiative of magnetic and being able to chain magnetic stuff together, they kind of never get back on board anyway, and they can't really go over the top well. So it's not a deck that really wants to concern itself with reload. You'd have to reshape it pretty significantly. Beyond that, random mechs I think are pretty bad on average. If you look at the mech pool, there's a lot of really super weak ones. Beyond that, mechs are rotating soon, so this card's going to have a pretty small window, I think, for all the Boomsday Project mechs that are currently empowering Mech Hunter. That's going to start going away, and that means Chopshop Copter has like maybe 3 months here on a very specific archetype to get there, and I just don't think it's going to. Mech Hunter's already a little bit fringe. It's only going to get worse in a few months, most likely. So Chopshop Copter, it's already in a fringe environment and kind of a complementary line of play, not really super cohesive with what the deck does currently, which to me leaves it a little bit out to dry contextually. So I don't really think this card's going to see play, even though when you look at it, just purely in and of itself, it feels okay numerically in a lot of ways, has a cool effect, but I just don't think it finds a home. Cleric of Scales is a 4-star card. Fiendish Servant is a 3-star card. Frenzied Fellwing is a 4-star card. Shadow Sculptor is a 2-star card. Fresh Scent is a 4-star card. Licensed Adventurer is a 4-star card. Boom Pistol Bully is a 5-star card. Hailbringer is a 2-star card. Risky Skipper is a 4-star card. Waxmancy is a 2-star card. Twisted Knowledge is a 3-star card. Chopshop Copter is a 2-star card. And that's it, folks, for all of our Galakrond's Awakening reviews. I hope I didn't miss anything. I might have missed a card. This was such a chaotic, hectic review season. Obviously, not much I can do there. Tried my best. Hopefully, for our next expansion, we'll have things a little tidier, but I look forward to that. It's only a little while away. You know, that's going to be fun. But in the meantime, share your thoughts on these cards. Check out all the new decks. We're going to be playing these over the next few weeks. Already got some cool new decks done, videos coming, and of course, more on the way as well. So looking really forward to trying all of these out and seeing how the meta shapes up after that. That said, yeah, thanks as always for watching. You guys are awesome. And until next time, game on.